I was 35 when my family finally showed me their true colors. Being the black sheep in a prestigious family of doctors and lawyers has always made me feel like I never quite belonged. Years ago, I made a choice that my family labeled a mistake, one they never let me forget. So when I received an invitation to a family dinner recently, I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps this would be a chance to heal old wounds. Little did I know, they were planning a forgiveness ceremony where they would unanimously vote against forgiving me. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever been judged unfairly by those who should love you unconditionally, hit that like button and subscribe to share in this journey together. Growing up in Wellesley, an affluent suburb of Boston, our house was the envy of the neighborhood. A sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured gardens that my mother Diana meticulously maintained, despite her demanding schedule as a corporate attorney. My father William was a renowned cardiac surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, whose schedule was even more demanding than my mother's. Their careers were prestigious, their social circle influential, and their expectations for their children impossibly high. My older brother Thomas was the golden child. 4 years my senior, he breezed through school with straight A's, was captain of the debate team, and could recite Shakespeare sonnets by age 12. He followed our father's footsteps into medicine, graduating summa cum laude from Harvard Medical School. Today he runs his own cardiology practice in downtown Boston and sits on hospital boards just like our father. My younger sister Amelia, 3 years behind me, was the family prodigy. By age 7, she was performing Chopin at recitals, while other kids were still struggling with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. She attended Juilliard for college and now plays violin with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. At family gatherings, my parents beamed with pride when introducing their accomplished children. Then there was me, sandwiched between two paragons of excellence. Selena Wright, the middle child who never quite measured up. School was always a struggle. Words jumped around on pages, numbers confused me, and no matter how hard I studied, the information refused to stick. My parents attributed my poor performance to laziness. My father would examine my C+ tests with a furrowed brow and ask, "Did you even try, Selena?" The truth was, I tried harder than anyone knew. Late nights with textbooks, flashcards spread across my bedroom floor, tears of frustration soaking into my pillow. It wasn't until my sophomore year of high school that a particularly observant English teacher suggested I might have dyslexia. The diagnosis came as both a relief and another disappointment to add to my parents' collection. Dyslexia is just an excuse for people who don't apply themselves, my mother said after my evaluation. Thomas read War and Peace when he was 12. Amelia has no trouble with her music sheets. What my parents never understood was that their constant comparisons only widened the gulf between us. While my siblings excelled in academics and music, I discovered my own talent in a different realm entirely. Photography became my salvation during my junior year of high school when I took an elective art class. Behind the lens, I found a world where words didn't matter, where I could communicate through images instead of the sentences that always betrayed me. I saved up from my after-school job at a local coffee shop to buy my first real camera, a used Canon that the owner of a photography shop sold to me at a discount after seeing some of my early work. When I brought home my first photography award from a statewide high school competition, my mother placed the certificate in a drawer, instead of on the fridge where Thomas's debate trophies and Amelia's music accolades were prominently displayed. "It's a nice hobby, Selena," my father said, patting my shoulder. "But it's not exactly a career, is it?" By senior year of high school, while my classmates and their parents excitedly discussed college applications, I dreaded the inevitable conversations at our dinner table. "Georgetown has an early decision program," my father announced one evening, passing the salad bowl. "Thomas got in that way." I was thinking about applying to Rhode Island School of Design, I said quietly. "Their photography program is one of the best in the country." The silence that followed was deafening. My father carefully set down his fork. Art school isn't what we had in mind, Selena. Right family members attend universities with prestige. Despite my protests, I was forced to apply to a list of schools my parents deemed acceptable. When the rejection letters came rolling in one after another from the Ivy League universities where my siblings had been welcomed with open arms, my parents didn't bother hiding their disappointment. Perhaps community college would be best, my mother suggested, her voice tinged with resignation. You could transfer somewhere better if you improve your grades, but I had already secretly applied and been accepted to the School of Visual Arts in New York with a partial scholarship based on my portfolio. When I announced my decision at dinner, my father left the table without a word. My mother pursed her lips in that way that made her look 20 years older. "You've always been determined to go your own way," she said. "Just don't expect us to finance this little rebellion." College became my escape. In New York, surrounded by other creative minds who valued expression over memorization, I thrived for the first time in my life. Each semester, my GPA improved, and my photography professors praised my unique perspective. I called home less frequently, tired of the subtle digs and comparisons to my siblings' achievements. It was during my sophomore year that I met Jason Wallace in an experimental darkroom techniques class. Tall, with wire-rimmed glasses and an infectious laugh, Jason was everything my previous boyfriends weren't. He came from a wealthy Connecticut family, but had rejected the family business to pursue photography. We bonded over our shared experiences of family disapproval and artistic passion. By junior year, we were inseparable. Jason and I collaborated on projects, shared a tiny apartment in the East Village, and talked about building our careers together after graduation. For once, I felt understood and valued for exactly who I was. When we went home for holidays, we went separately. I wasn't ready to introduce Jason to my family, afraid their judgment would taint what we had built. Little did I know that decision would set in motion events that would haunt me for more than a decade. Senior year of college was supposed to be our time to shine. Jason and I had built impressive portfolios, and both of us were applying for positions at magazines and studios across the country. Our professors encouraged us to aim high, submit to competitions, and network with industry professionals who visited campus. Then came the email that would change everything. I had applied on a whim for the Clement Rousseau Photography Fellowship in Paris, a prestigious year-long internship awarded to only 2 graduating photography students worldwide each year. I never expected to actually get it. When the acceptance email arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I stared at my laptop screen in disbelief. Jason found me in the same position 30 minutes later when he returned from his printing lab class. "Selena, what's wrong?" he asked, dropping his portfolio case by the door. "I got it," I whispered, turning the screen toward him. "The Rousseau Fellowship. I actually got it." His face cycled through emotions. Pride, happiness, then something else I couldn't quite identify. He hugged me tightly, lifting me off the ground in celebration. "This is huge. We need to celebrate." We went out that night to our favorite dive bar, where our friends toasted my success. But as the evening wore on, Jason grew quieter. Back at our apartment, as we lay in bed, he finally spoke what was on his mind. "What about us? Paris is an ocean away." "It's just a year," I said, tracing patterns on his arm. "We can do long distance. People manage it all the time." He was silent for so long, I thought he'd fallen asleep. "Or you could come with me," I suggested. "You could freelance while I do the fellowship." "You know I can't afford that," he said softly. "And my parents would never support me moving to Paris without a solid job." The next few weeks were filled with tension. We tried to talk about solutions, but every conversation ended in frustrated silence or tears. Then 2 weeks before graduation, Jason surprised me with dinner at an upscale restaurant we could barely afford. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his silverware throughout the appetizer. When dessert arrived, He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and set it on the table between us. My stomach dropped. "I love you, Selena," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "I don't want to lose you to another continent. Marry me. We can start our life together here in New York. There will be other opportunities that don't require us to separate." I stared at the unopened box, thoughts racing. The Rousseau Fellowship wasn't just an opportunity. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to learn from masters, to build an international portfolio, to make connections that could define my entire career. Marriage at 22 hadn't been in my plans. "Jason," I began carefully, "I love you too, but this fellowship, it's everything I've worked for. Can't we wait? Get engaged, but wait to marry until after I come back?" His face hardened. "So your career comes before us, before me." "That's not fair," I said, feeling tears well up. "It's not an either-or choice." "Isn't it, though?" He pushed the ring box toward me. "Paris or me. That's the choice you're making right now." We argued for hours that night, going in circles. Jason couldn't understand why I wouldn't defer the fellowship for a year. I couldn't understand why he was making me choose between my relationship and my career, when men were never asked to make that choice. The week before graduation, I made my decision. I would accept the fellowship. I tried to talk to Jason about maintaining our relationship long distance, but he had become distant and cold. The night I told him my final decision, he walked out of our apartment without a word. I didn't know then that he had gone straight to his phone and called my parents. 3 days later, my father called me for the first time in months. "What is this I hear about you breaking off an engagement to run off to Paris?" he demanded without even a hello. "Dad, I didn't break off an engagement. I got offered an incredible opportunity, and Jason gave me an ultimatum." The Wallace family called us Selena. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Jason's father and I serve on the hospital board together. How am I supposed to face him now that my daughter has broken his son's heart?" That was the real sin in my father's eyes. Not that I had chosen my career over marriage at 22. Not that I had made a choice that prioritized my growth and future. The problem was that I had embarrassed him in front of his colleagues. My mother called next. "Think of what people will say, Selena. The Wallaces are hosting a graduation party for Jason next weekend that we were invited to. Now we have to make excuses." Neither of them asked how I felt. Neither congratulated me on the fellowship. All that mattered was the social discomfort I had caused them. The morning after graduation, which my parents attended but barely spoke to me during, I received a final blow. Jason had told his parents that I had led him on for years, encouraged him to spend money on a ring, then coldly rejected him to chase fame in Europe. This distorted version of events had spread through my parents' social circle like wildfire. My father called again, his voice ice cold. "You've outdone yourself this time, Selena. Mrs. Wallace was in tears at the club yesterday. Is your photography hobby really worth destroying a good man's life over?" I tried to explain, to defend myself, but it was useless. In their eyes, I was selfish, cold-hearted, career-obsessed. The black sheep had proven them right all along. A week later, I boarded a plane to Paris with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Not just from losing Jason, but from knowing my family had taken his side without hesitation. They had once again found me wanting, and this time the verdict felt permanent. Paris should have been a dream come true, and professionally it was. I worked alongside renowned photographers, developed my style, and saw my images published in European magazines. But each accomplishment was tinged with sadness, knowing that the people who should have been proudest of me didn't care. Every few weeks, I would send an email to my family with updates and photographs of my work. The responses, when they came at all, were brief and formal. When I landed a spread in a prestigious art magazine, my mother replied with, "That's nice, dear. Thomas just performed his first solo surgery." After a year, the fellowship ended, but I had made enough connections to stay in Europe. I spent another year freelancing in Paris, then Berlin, building a portfolio that any young photographer would envy. But the distance from my family had become more than geographical. It was as if a chasm had opened between us, with my decision to follow my dreams on one side and their disappointment on the other. When I finally returned to the United States 2 years later, I chose New York over Boston. The thought of moving back to my hometown, of running into Jason or his parents, of living under the shadow of my family's disapproval, was unbearable. So I rented a tiny studio in Brooklyn and set about rebuilding my life and career on American soil. The next decade of my life was defined by two parallel tracks: professional growth and family estrangement. In New York, I thrived creatively. My European portfolio opened doors that would have otherwise remained firmly shut. I started with freelance work for local magazines, then national publications took notice. By my late 20s, I had developed a reputation for capturing intimate emotional portraits that revealed something essential about their subjects. My first gallery showing at age 29 was a collection of photographs documenting the lives of immigrant restaurant workers in New York City. The New York Times Arts section called it a revealing glimpse into the invisible hands that feed the city. More exhibitions followed, a photography book, teaching positions at workshops, and eventually a semester as a visiting instructor at my alma mater. On paper, my life looked like a success story, the dyslexic middle child who had forged her own path against the odds. But family holidays told a different story. I made the trip to Boston for Thanksgiving and Christmas most years, driven by a persistent hope that time might have healed the rift between us. Each visit followed the same painful pattern. Initial polite greetings would give way to passive-aggressive comments over dinner. "Remember when Selena broke poor Jason's heart?" my mother would say, as if introducing an amusing anecdote rather than weaponizing my past. "How is Jason doing?" I asked during one particularly tense Christmas dinner 6 years after Paris. "Have you kept in touch?" My father's expression darkened. "He's married to Caroline Fisher now. They have twin boys. He's taken over his father's investment firm." What went unsaid but hung heavy in the air, Jason had done what was expected of him. He had followed the proper path, married the right kind of woman, produced grandchildren, taken over the family business. Everything I had rejected. "That's nice," I said, pushing food around my plate. "My book is being translated into French and German next year." My mother changed the subject to Thomas's new house in Cambridge. It was during these brief, agonizing family gatherings that I learned Jason had married barely a year after our breakup. That knowledge should have released me from any lingering guilt, but my family continued to treat me as if I had ruined his life, as if my choice had irreparably damaged a good man, rather than simply freeing us both to find different paths to happiness. After each visit, I'd return to New York emotionally drained, promising myself I wouldn't go back. Then the next holiday would approach, and I'd try again, trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. When I turned 30, I finally started therapy. Dr. Karen Lee became my guide through the tangled forest of family dynamics and childhood wounds. In her sunlit office overlooking Union Square, I began to understand that my family's treatment wasn't something I deserved or had earned. "What you're describing sounds like scapegoating," Dr. Lee explained during one session. "In family systems, theory sometimes one member is unconsciously selected to bear the blame for family problems or tensions. It allows the others to maintain a false sense of harmony." "But there weren't any major family problems," I protested. "My parents are still married. No one had addiction issues or abuse." "Achievement can be its own kind of dysfunction," she said gently. "Especially when love and approval are contingent on meeting impossible standards." Over months of therapy, I began to see my family dynamics with clearer eyes. How Thomas and Amelia had been designated as the good children, while I was assigned the role of disappointment. How that dynamic persisted into adulthood because it served a purpose for everyone but me. This newfound clarity made the family visits even harder to endure. 3 years ago at Christmas, my mother made a comment about how I was still just taking pictures while my siblings had built something meaningful. Something inside me snapped. I stood up from the perfectly set dinner table, thanked them for the meal, and drove back to New York that same night, my gifts still wrapped under the tree. After that, communication dwindled to near nothing. Birthday cards, the occasional text message, a stilted phone call on Mother's Day or Father's Day. I built a chosen family of friends in New York who celebrated my successes and supported me through setbacks. People who loved me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. Which is why when my mother called out of the blue last month, her voice unusually warm, I was immediately suspicious. "Selena, darling, we're having a special family dinner next Saturday," she said. "Everyone will be there. Thomas and his wife Amelia and her partner, even your cousins from Chicago." "What's the occasion?" I asked cautiously. "Just a family gathering," she said too quickly. "It's been too long since we've all been together. Your father and I have been doing some personal growth work through church. We want to reconnect." Something in her tone, an unusual note of vulnerability, perhaps made me consider it. And despite years of disappointment, a small, stubborn part of me still yearned for my family's acceptance. "We really want you there, Selena," my mother added, and for once, she sounded sincere. I hung up the phone with a familiar flutter of hope in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. For a week after my mother's call, I oscillated between hope and skepticism. Part of me wanted to believe that my parents had genuinely changed, that they were extending an olive branch after years of emotional distance. Another part remembered the countless times I'd gotten my hopes up only to leave family gatherings feeling worse than before. I called my best friend Zoe, who had witnessed the aftermath of too many disastrous family visits. "They said they've been doing personal growth work," I explained, twisting the phone cord around my finger like a nervous teenager. "Maybe they've had some kind of awakening." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "People can change, Sel, but go in with realistic expectations. If this is a step forward, great. If not, you know you have a family here in New York who loves you exactly as you are." My next call was to Dr. Lee, who helped me develop a strategy for the visit. "Set clear boundaries," she advised. "Decide in advance how long you'll stay. Have an exit plan if things become too difficult. And most importantly, remember that their behavior reflects on them, not on your worth." Despite my reservations, I found myself looking forward to the dinner. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter in our family story. I wanted to show them the woman I had become successful on my own terms. Perhaps time had softened their judgment. I spent far too long choosing what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress that projected professional success without appearing to try too hard. I selected a bottle of expensive Bordeaux as a gift, remembering my father's appreciation for French wine. As a second thought, I added a framed print of one of my photographs. A peaceful sunrise over the Brooklyn Bridge that had won a Cityscape Award the previous year. The drive from New York to Boston gave me too much time to think. I rehearsed what I might say, how I would react to various scenarios. By the time I pulled into the familiar neighborhood of my childhood, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Wellesley hadn't changed much. The same manicured lawns, the same stately homes, the same sense of old money and quiet privilege. As I drove down Maple Street, memories flooded back. Riding my bike to the corner store. Walking to school with Thomas before he decided he was too cool to be seen with his younger sister. Sneaking out my bedroom window to meet friends in high school. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had. Georgian-style white columns, black shutters. The garden meticulously maintained by the landscaping service my mother employed. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage before taking my gifts and approaching the front door. My mother answered my knock perfectly coiffed in a navy blue dress I didn't recognize. "Selena," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You look well. Come in, everyone's already here. The foyer smelled of furniture polish and the same lavender sachets my mother had always tucked into drawers and closets. Family photos lined the entryway wall, the same ones that had been there for years. I noticed there were no recent photos of me among them. My father emerged from his study greeting me with a formal handshake rather than a hug. "Selena, good of you to come. Traffic wasn't too bad, I hope." Before I could answer, my siblings appeared. Thomas looking more like our father than ever in a tailored suit, his wife Jessica beside him. Amelia, elegant as always, with her partner Sam. Polite hellos were exchanged stiff and formal, as if we were business acquaintances rather than family. As we moved toward the dining room, I noticed something odd. The table was set with unusual formality, even for my mother's standards. Name cards marked each place, and beside each plate sat what looked like small index cards. In the center of the table, rather than the usual floral arrangement, stood a wooden box with a slot in the top like a ballot box. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. "What's all this?" I asked, gesturing toward the unusual setup. My mother smiled a tight, nervous smile. "All in good time, dear. Let's have some appetizers first. I've made your favorite spinach puffs." They weren't my favorite, they were Thomas's, but I let it go. We moved to the living room, where my aunt and uncle from Chicago were already seated, along with two of my cousins. A laptop was open on the coffee table, showing a video call with more relatives I rarely spoke to. Small talk was excruciating. Questions about my work were surface level with no real interest in my answers. When I mentioned a recent commission from National Geographic, my father changed the subject to Thomas's new position on the hospital board. By the time we moved to the dining room for dinner, my hope for reconciliation was fading fast. As we took our assigned seats, I noticed more details that set my nerves on edge. The cards by each plate had words printed on them. I picked mine up discreetly and felt my blood run cold. On one side, in elegant script was written, "Forgive." On the other, "Not yet." My father cleared his throat and stood at the head of the table. "Before we begin our meal, I want to explain why we've gathered you all here tonight. Diana and I have been attending a new spiritual direction program at St. James Episcopal. Part of the work we've been doing involves family healing and forgiveness." He paused, looking directly at me for the first time that evening. "Our counselor suggested something called a forgiveness ceremony, a way to clear the air and move forward as a family. We've asked you all here to participate in this important process." My mother stood now too, her hands clasped in front of her. "We'll begin by expressing the hurts that need forgiveness. Then everyone will vote on whether forgiveness should be granted or whether more amends need to be made first." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner. This was a trial, and I was the accused. The dining room suddenly felt airless, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. I looked around at the faces of my family members, searching for any sign that they found this as bizarre and inappropriate as I did. But they were nodding along, some looking solemn, others almost eager. "I don't understand," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "Who exactly needs forgiveness here?" My father's expression was a mixture of pity and righteousness that made my skin crawl. "Selena, this is about addressing the patterns that have caused pain in our family, the decisions that have created rifts between us." Translation: this was about me. I was the one being called to account. My mother passed around small notebooks and pens. "We'll each write down the things we feel need to be forgiven. Then, we'll share them aloud." The scratching of pens on paper filled the uncomfortable silence. I sat frozen pen untouched as family members around me wrote with disturbing enthusiasm. What was I supposed to be writing? A list of my own sins, or things I wanted to forgive them for. The ambiguity seemed deliberate, a trap waiting to be sprung. After a few minutes, my father cleared his throat again. "I'll begin. he said, unfolding his paper. Selena, over the years, there have been incidents that have caused pain to this family. The most significant was your treatment of Jason Wallace. So there it was. More than a decade later, and this was still the unforgivable sin. You accepted his proposal, then callously discarded him to pursue your own interests in Europe. My father continued, as if reciting established facts rather than his distorted version of events. This caused significant embarrassment to our family and created a rift with the Wallaces that took years to repair. Your mother and I had to face them at social functions, knowing our daughter had broken their son's heart. I opened my mouth to protest, to clarify that I had never accepted Jason's proposal, but my mother was already speaking. Beyond the Jason incident, there's been your general attitude of dismissal toward family obligations, she said, reading from her notes. Missing Thomas's medical school graduation for a photography assignment. Being 3 hours late to Amelia's first symphony performance because of a delayed flight that wouldn't have been an issue if you'd flown in a day early as we suggested. One by one, family members added to the litany of my supposed sins. Thomas mentioned money he'd lent me during a tight month after college that I had taken too long to repay. Amelia brought up childhood squabbles as evidence of my selfish nature. Even my aunt and uncle from Chicago had grievances, citing a thank you card for a wedding gift that had apparently arrived inappropriately late. The family on the video call chimed in with their own contributions. My cousin remembered a Thanksgiving when I had supposedly insulted his wife's pumpkin pie. Another relative mentioned how I always seemed disinterested in family news. As the accusations piled up, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a play about someone else's life. The incidents they described were either wildly exaggerated, completely misinterpreted, or in some cases, entirely fabricated. Yet they were presented with such conviction, such righteous certainty, that for a moment, I almost doubted my own memories. "Would you like to respond, Selena?" my father finally asked when everyone had spoken. I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to be my family. They watched me expectantly, some with expressions of concern that seemed genuine, others with barely concealed satisfaction. "I would like to clarify some things," I began carefully. "First, I never accepted Jason's proposal. He gave me an ultimatum, forcing me to choose between marriage and a once-in-a-lifetime career opportunity. I chose my career, as I had every right to do at 22. My father waved his hand dismissively. "That's not how the Wallaces remember it." "I'm sure it's not," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "But it's what happened. As for the other incidents, I've never intentionally hurt anyone in this family. I've made mistakes, certainly. I missed events I should have been at. I've been late, forgetful, imperfect. But so has everyone at this table." My mother's lips thinned to a tight line. "This isn't about our shortcomings, Selena. This is about addressing yours so we can move forward as a family." "That's not how forgiveness works," I said. "It can't be one-sided." "Let's move to the voting portion," my father interjected, clearly uncomfortable with my pushback. "Everyone has their cards. Forgive means you feel Selena has shown appropriate remorse and understanding of how her actions have affected others. Not yet means you feel more amends or acknowledgement is needed before forgiveness can be granted." I couldn't believe this was happening. My family had orchestrated an elaborate ritual to judge whether I was worthy of their forgiveness without any recognition that relationships are two-way streets, that they might have played a role in our estrangement. "This isn't fair," I said, my voice finally rising with emotion. "You've ambushed me with a list of grievances spanning decades, many of which are distorted or untrue, and now you want to vote on whether I'm forgiven. I didn't even know I was coming here to be put on trial." "It's not a trial, Selena," my mother said with exaggerated patience. "It's a healing ceremony. If you receive forgiveness, we can all move forward. If not, You'll have clarity on what you need to do to repair these relationships. Before I could protest further, my father called for the vote. Please place your cards in the box forgive or not yet facing up. One by one, family members rose from their seats and approached the wooden box in the center of the table. My brother avoided my gaze as he placed his card in the slot. My sister gave me an apologetic glance, but still deposited her card. Even the relatives on the video call held up their choices to the camera, so my father could proxy vote for them. I remained seated, hands clenched in my lap, watching this surreal ritual unfold. I didn't place a card in the box. I couldn't participate in this farce. When everyone had voted, my father opened the box and solemnly counted the cards. Though I already knew what the outcome would be, the final tally still felt like a physical blow. The result is unanimous, he announced gravely. Not yet. My family had voted as one that I was unworthy of forgiveness. There are moments in life that crystallize everything, where clarity cuts through the fog of emotion and conditioning like a laser beam. This was mine. As my father announced the unanimous verdict against me, something inside me broke. Not in the way things had broken before leaving me wounded and desperate for approval. This was different. This was the breaking of chains I hadn't fully recognized were binding me. Not yet, my father repeated, as if I hadn't heard him the first time. Now we can discuss what steps Selena needs to take to earn forgiveness. I looked around the table at these people who shared my blood but seemed incapable of seeing me, really seeing me. My mother's lips were pursed in that familiar expression of disappointment. Thomas studied his water glass, avoiding my eyes. Amelia at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. The rest watched with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction. My father was already pulling out another sheet of paper. We've prepared some suggestions for moving forward. First, we think a formal apology to Jason and the Wallace family would be appropriate. After 12 years? The words escaped me in a disbelieving laugh. It's never too late to make amends, my mother said primly. The Wallaces are still part of our social circle. Second, my father continued as if I hadn't spoken. We would like to see more commitment to family obligations, attendance at important events, regular visits, staying in better touch. My mother nodded along. And perhaps some reconsideration of your career path. You're 35 now, Selena. It's time to think about stability. Thomas knows of an administrative position at the hospital that would offer benefits retirement planning. I sat in stunned silence as they continued outlining all the ways I should change to become worthy of their acceptance. Give up the career I'd built, apologize for choosing my own path, make myself smaller, more convenient, less me. Thomas finally spoke up. It's not that we don't support your photography, Selena, but is it really sustainable? Jessica and I are already putting money aside for our kids' college funds. What's your long-term plan? And what about a family of your own? Amelia added, though she at least had the grace to look apologetic. Mom and Dad just want what's best for you. We all do. Something shifted inside me, then a tectonic plate moving deep beneath the surface of who I'd been all these years. The daughter desperate for approval, the sister living in shadows, the family scapegoat accepting blame that wasn't hers to carry. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my untouched dinner plate. Thank you all for making things so incredibly clear tonight. I said, my voice steady and calm despite the storm inside me. For most of my life, I've believed there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Something that made me unworthy of the same love and acceptance you've given Thomas and Amelia. I looked at each of their faces as I continued. I've blamed myself for not being smart enough, successful enough, obedient enough. I've carried the weight of being the family disappointment for so long, it became part of my identity. But tonight, watching this bizarre ritual you've created to formalize my status as the unforgivable one, I finally see the truth. I turned to my father. You're still angry about Jason Wallace because he was from the right kind of family with the right kind of connections. You wanted a merger, not a marriage that would make your daughter happy. And when I chose my own path instead, it wasn't about Jason's broken heart. It was about your broken expectations. His face flushed red, but I wasn't finished. What none of you know, what I never told anyone, is that Jason had cheated on me with his ex-girlfriend just weeks before he proposed. I found out from a mutual friend but decided not to confront him because I was trying to make things work. His proposal wasn't about love, it was about control. He knew I'd gotten the Paris Fellowship and was trying to prevent me from going. Shocked silence greeted this revelation. I turned to my mother next. You've never once visited my apartment in New York. You've never attended a single one of my gallery showings. Last year, one of my photographs was nominated for the Leighton Prize. I called to tell you, and you changed the subject to Amelia's new cello. I didn't realize it was important, she said weakly. No, you didn't, because you decided years ago that what I do doesn't matter. I picked up the framed photograph I'd brought as a gift. I took this at 5 a.m. after staying up all night. It won the Urban Landscape category in American Photography's annual competition. I've had work acquired by the Museum of Modern Art. I teach masterclasses at my alma mater. I'm not just taking pictures, Mother. I've built a career I'm proud of with or without your approval. I looked around at all of them. I've spent years trying to earn a place at this table, but tonight, I finally understand that the price of admission is too high. You don't want me, you want a version of me that doesn't exist. One that makes the same choices you would make, values the same things you value, and never challenges the family narrative. My hands were shaking now, but my voice remained clear and strong. I forgive myself for believing I needed your approval to be worthy. I forgive myself for all the years I've spent trying to earn unconditional love that should have been freely given. And most of all, I forgive myself for not seeing sooner that the problem was never me. I gathered my purse and the photograph I'd brought. I won't be participating in any more forgiveness ceremonies. I won't be apologizing to Jason Wallace, and I won't be changing my career or my life to meet your expectations. If and when you're ready to know the real me, to celebrate my actual accomplishments and accept the choices I've made, you know where to find me. With that, I walked out of the dining room through the foyer, lined with family photos that erased my adult existence, and out the front door into the cool evening air. Behind me, I could hear confused voices, my mother calling my name, but I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I was walking away from my family, not in defeat, but in strength. I wasn't running from judgment, but standing firmly in my own truth. As I started my car and pulled away from my childhood home, tears streamed down my face. Not tears of rejection or inadequacy, but tears of release. The weight of decades of conditional love and impossible expectations lifted from my shoulders with each mile marker on the highway back to New York, back to the life I had built, the life that was truly mine. The drive back to New York was cathartic. I cried for the first hour, releasing years of pent-up pain and frustration as the Massachusetts countryside gave way to Connecticut, and then the familiar approach to the city I now called home. By the time I crossed the George Washington Bridge, my tears had dried, replaced by a strange light feeling I barely recognized as freedom. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I unlocked the door to my apartment in Brooklyn. The space felt different somehow, as if my perception had shifted. This wasn't just where I lived, it was a physical manifestation of the life I had chosen and built with my own hands. The gallery wall of my photographs, the mismatched furniture collected from flea markets and estate sales, the bookshelves crammed with art books and novels, all of it reflected choices I had made, a path I had forged without a roadmap. I slept deeply that night, and when I woke the next morning, the events of the forgiveness dinner felt almost dreamlike in their absurdity. Had my family really staged an intervention complete with voting cards and a ballot box? The memory might have been funny if it weren't so painful. Over the next few days, my phone buzzed occasionally with messages from family members. My mother sent a terse text saying I had overreacted and ruined a chance for healing. My father didn't reach out at all. Amelia sent a longer message that seemed torn between family loyalty and genuine concern. "That dinner was weird, Sel," she wrote. "I'm sorry it went down like that, but Mom and Dad really were trying in their way. Maybe call when you've calmed down." I didn't respond to any of them. For the first time, I wasn't rushing to smooth things over to be the one who extended the olive branch. Instead, I focused on processing what had happened with Dr. Lee in our weekly sessions. "What they did was emotionally manipulative," she confirmed during our first appointment after the dinner. "Setting up a scenario where you would be judged and found wanting without warning or real opportunity to defend yourself. The question now is, where do you want to go from here?" That question stayed with me for weeks. Where did I want to go? For so long, my relationship with my family had been defined by their expectations and my failure to meet them. Now that I was finally seeing through the fog of their disapproval, what kind of relationship, if any, did I want? I threw myself into work, focusing on an upcoming gallery exhibition of a new portrait series I'd been developing. The collection featured people who had reinvented themselves after major life changes, photographed in spaces that represented both their past and their present. Looking at the images now, I realized I had unconsciously been working through my own transformation through my subjects. 2 weeks after the disastrous dinner, I received an unexpected message from Thomas's wife, Jessica. We had never been close, maintaining a polite but distant relationship at family gatherings. "I've been thinking about what happened at that dinner," her message read. "It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't speak up. I should have. For what it's worth, I've always admired how you've charted your own course. Would you be open to having coffee next time you're in Boston? No pressure, just thought it might be nice to get to know each other better, separate from family dynamics." The message surprised me, a small crack in the united front my family had always presented. I replied with cautious openness, suggesting we could meet if I was in Boston, but making no immediate plans to visit. A week later, my friend Zoe convinced me to join a photography retreat in upstate New York, a weekend gathering of artists sharing techniques and inspiration. It was exactly what I needed: time away from both work pressures and family drama, surrounded by people who spoke my language of light and shadow composition and story. During a sunset shoot by a lake, I met Martin, a photography professor from Rhode Island, who had attended the same art school as me, though years earlier. We bonded over shared experiences and artistic influences, staying up late around the campfire, discussing the evolution of documentary photography. After the retreat, we kept in touch, first professionally, and then gradually something more personal developed. When Martin came to New York to see my exhibition opening, it felt natural to invite him into my life. Unlike previous relationships where I had kept my family history carefully compartmentalized, I found myself opening up to him about the forgiveness dinner and the years of conditional acceptance that preceded it. "That's next-level dysfunctional," he said, shaking his head after I described the voting cards. "But also sadly revealing. They showed you exactly who they are and where you stand." "That's what hurts the most," I admitted. "The clarity of it. There's no more pretending we're just going through a rough patch or that things will naturally improve with time." "Maybe that clarity is a gift," Martin suggested. "Painful but necessary for you to finally move forward on your own terms." He was right. As the weeks turned to months, I found myself building a life that wasn't defined by the absence of family approval. I deepened friendships, spent holidays with people who genuinely enjoyed my company, celebrated career milestones without the shadow of disappointment lurking in the background. My gallery exhibition was a success, with several pieces selling and a favorable review in an influential art publication. When the email came announcing I had won a prestigious photography award, the National Portrait Society's Contemporary Vision Prize. My first instinct was still to call my parents. My finger hovered over their contact information before I put the phone down and called Zoe instead, who screamed with genuine excitement and insisted on taking me out to celebrate. The award ceremony was held at an elegant venue in Manhattan 6 months after the forgiveness dinner. I invited Martin, Zoe, and several other friends who had become my chosen family. As I dressed that evening in a vintage 1950s cocktail dress I'd found in a thrift store, I felt a sense of completion of having come full circle. The awkward dyslexic middle child who had never measured up had become a woman recognized for her unique vision and perspective. I was chatting with colleagues at the reception when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with Amelia. "Surprise," she said with an uncertain smile. "I hope it's okay that I came." For a moment, I was speechless. "How did you know about this?" "I follow your gallery on Instagram," she admitted. "When they posted about your nomination, I got tickets right away. I would have told you, but I wasn't sure you'd want me here." The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the carefully curated family image we normally maintained in public. This was my sister reaching out across the divide. "I'm glad you came," I said finally, and meant it. We found a quiet corner away from the crowd, and for the first time in perhaps our entire adult lives, we had a real conversation. Not about family expectations or past grievances, but about our lives, our work, our dreams. "I've been doing some therapy of my own," Amelia confessed. "That dinner was a wake-up call. The way Mom and Dad orchestrated it, the things they said about you, it made me see patterns I've been blind to. The way they pit us against each other, the conditional approval. You've always been on the receiving end of that approval." I pointed out not accusingly, but stating a fact. "And it's been its own kind of prison," she replied. "Do you know how terrified I am of disappointing them? How exhausting it is to maintain the perfect daughter image. When you walked out that night, part of me wanted to follow you." We talked through the ceremony, the aftermath, the scattered contacts since. Amelia confirmed that our parents were still angry about my dramatic exit and unwillingness to work on healing the family, as they put it. "Thomas is firmly in their camp," she said. "But Jessica actually defended you at brunch the next day. Said the whole thing was inappropriate and humiliating." When my name was called during the awards presentation, Amelia squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you, Sel. Not just for this award, but for everything you've built." Those words, so simple and yet so profound, coming from a family member, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. As I accepted the award and gave a brief speech thanking the people who had supported my journey, I caught sight of my sister in the audience applauding with genuine pride. Later that evening, as Martin and I walked back to my apartment through the glittering Manhattan night, I felt a sense of peace I'd been searching for my whole life. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my thoughtful silence. "Better than okay," I replied. "I think I finally understand what forgiveness really means." "What's that?" "It's not something other people vote on. It's something you give yourself. Permission to stop carrying the weight of other people's expectations. Permission to define your own worth." In the months since that night, I've maintained careful contact with Amelia, rebuilding our relationship on new, healthier terms. We text regularly and have met for lunch when she's in New York. My parents remain distant, unwilling to acknowledge their role in our estrangement, or to accept me as I am, rather than as they wish I would be. Perhaps that will change with time, perhaps not. What has changed irrevocably is how I see myself. No longer the family disappointment, but a woman who had the courage to choose her own path despite immense pressure to conform. Not perfect, not without regrets or mistakes, but worthy of love and belonging exactly as I am. The forgiveness dinner, with all its bizarre ritual and painful rejection, turned out to be a gift after all. It showed me with perfect clarity that I had been seeking acceptance in the wrong places all along. True forgiveness wasn't something my family could grant or withhold with voting cards and judgment. It was something I needed to give myself and finally have. Has your family ever made you feel like you needed to earn their love? Have you found the strength to define your own worth regardless of others' approval? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with family judgment know they're not alone. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more healing than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to write your own.